On her very first day inside Chicago's most feared mafia empire, Naomi Carter looked like just another assistant who wouldn't survive the week. One clumsy mistake should have ended her career, but instead uncovered a deadly secret no one else had noticed. As a lonely Sicilian Mafia boss slowly discovered the courage, kindness, and quiet brilliance hidden beneath her awkward exterior, an old betrayal rose from the past, threatening his family, his empire, and both of their lives. What began with a spilled cup of coffee would become a story of trust, sacrifice, healing, and a love built not on fear, but on mutual respect. 11 assistants had walked out of Carrera Tower in less than a year. Some left in tears. Others were dismissed before finishing lunch. By Monday morning, the betting pool downstairs wasn't about who would replace the Sicilian Mafia boss anymore. It was about how long the next assistant would last. Naomi Carter stepped through the revolving doors, carrying a worn leather satchel and a paper cup of coffee she couldn't really afford. The polished marble reflected the city lights, still fading from Chicago's rainy dawn. Every pair of eyes seemed to measure her before she even reached the executive elevator. A security guard whispered, "Poor woman." Another simply looked away. The executive floor was unnervingly quiet. The only sound was the steady echo of expensive shoes crossing stone. At the end of the corridor stood Nicolas Carrera's office, framed by dark walnut doors and guarded like a private vault. Naomi drew one slow breath. Then her heel caught the edge of a Persian rug. Coffee splashed across the massive oak desk. Folders burst open. Pages drifted through the air like frightened birds. A crystal paperweight rolled onto the floor. Nobody moved. 2 bodyguards stepped forward. The HR director quietly reached inside a folder, already holding termination papers. Naomi knelt in humiliation, gathering documents with trembling hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Her fingers brushed against a black fountain pen lying beside the scattered fields. She froze. The faint scent rising from its silver nib didn't belong in ordinary ink. Almond? Bitter almond. Without thinking, she snatched the pen just as Nicholas reached for it. Every guard instinctively grabbed for a weapon. "You can't use this," Naomi blurted. Silence swallowed the room. I used to restore historical documents," she said, struggling to steady her voice. "Certain preservation chemicals smell similar, but this is different. Someone replaced the ink." Nicholas didn't blink. He nodded once. A security specialist entered minutes later with a portable testing kit. Nobody spoke while the device processed the sample. Then a single red warning light appeared. The ink reservoir contained a contact poison capable of causing symptoms that looked like sudden natural cardiac failure. The room turned ice cold. Nicholas slowly looked at the woman everyone had expected to fire before breakfast. His voice remained calm. "Did you just save my life? Or do you know far too much about how someone planned to end it?" Naomi swallowed. Every guard in the room watched her as though one wrong word might end her first day before it had truly begun. "I know old ink," she answered quietly. "Not murder." For several long seconds, Nicolas Carrera simply studied her face. Then he nodded toward the security team. "Escort Ms. Carter to Human Resources. She keeps her position." A wave of disbelief swept through the executive floor. By noon, everyone had already given her a nickname: the walking accident. No one cared that she had saved the most powerful man in the building. They remembered only the spilled coffee, the scattered files, and the trembling apology. Naomi pretended not to hear the whispers. She had heard worse. 6 years earlier, she had walked away from a career restoring legal archives in Baltimore to care for her mother after Parkinson's disease stole the older woman's independence. Medical bills swallowed every dollar they owned. After the funeral came foreclosure, unemployment, and months of wondering whether anyone would ever trust her with meaningful work again. Carrera Tower was nothing like home. Its glass walls reflected black SUVs instead of neighborhood porches. Men in tailored suits carried encrypted phones instead of grocery bags. Yet kindness still seemed to belong there. When she noticed an elderly janitor struggling to complete online insurance forms, she quietly finished them during lunch. Later, she slipped her unopened sandwich onto the desk of a nervous intern working another unpaid evening shift. Neither knew who had helped them. As twilight settled over Chicago, Naomi organized documents before leaving. One shipping file slid from the stack. A crimson wax seal caught the fading light. Her breathing stopped. The emblem pressed into the wax matched the tiny mark engraved beneath the poisoned fountain pen. Someone inside Carrera's empire was connecting two secrets that were never supposed to meet. And Naomi had just become the only person who noticed. She slipped the shipping file back into the stack without drawing attention to herself. The crimson wax seal stayed in her mind all night, refusing to fade. By sunrise, Chicago's skyline glowed silver beyond the windows of Carrera Tower as Naomi returned to work, determined to say nothing until she understood what she had seen. Nicolas seemed to have reached the same conclusion. Without explanation, he placed 3 thick folders on the corner of her desk before disappearing into a board meeting. No instructions, no deadline, only a handwritten note. Review. Naomi assumed he wanted the pages organized. Instead, old instincts awakened the moment she began reading. A refrigerated warehouse contract listed container numbers that belonged to a different port. A freight invoice charged 3 separate companies for the exact same shipment. An electronic signature approving an overseas transfer had been created 12 hours after its owner boarded a flight to London. She quietly marked each discrepancy with small yellow tabs. No speeches, no credit, just facts. Late that afternoon, Nicolas opened the folders inside his office. One by one, he compared Naomi's note against the company's internal records. Every observation proved correct. Millions of dollars had nearly vanished without anyone noticing. Outside the glass walls, department heads whispered that the clumsy assistant had gotten lucky again. Inside, Nicolas no longer believed in luck. As executives filed into the conference room, his gaze lingered on Naomi for only a second, but it was enough for everyone to notice. He had stopped watching her mistakes. He had started watching her mind. When the meeting ended, Naomi gathered the remaining files. One transport manifest caught her attention. The warehouse responsible for the suspicious shipment belonged to Victoria Hale, the executive Nicolas trusted more than anyone else. Naomi looked toward Victoria's office. Behind the closed door, someone quietly locked it from the inside. She told herself not to jump to conclusions. A locked door proved nothing. Still, the image lingered as rain swept across the windows of Carrera Tower that evening, turning Chicago into a blur of silver lights and dark glass. Most employees had gone home. Naomi stayed. A stack of legal manuals rested beside her keyboard, their pages marked with handwritten notes. 6 years away from her profession had changed regulations she once knew by heart, and she refused to let another opportunity slip away because time had moved on without her. She erased another calculation, started again, then smiled faintly. One more time. She never noticed Nicolas standing outside the glass wall of the empty office. He had come to collect a forgotten file. Instead, he found the woman everyone called Clumsy, teaching herself the career she thought she had lost forever. He quietly walked away before she could see him. An hour later, a burst of fireworks exploded above Lake Michigan. The colorful reflections flashed across the windows. Inside the executive floor, something changed. A crystal glass slipped from Nicholas's hand and shattered across the marble. His breathing became uneven. His shoulders tightened as another explosion echoed outside, sounding painfully close to gunfire. Naomi hurried toward the doorway, then stopped herself. Instead of rushing in, she slowly lowered the blinds, dimmed the lights, and gently closed the office door against the noise. "You don't have to explain anything," she said softly from several feet away. "Would you rather be alone? Or would you like me to stay over here until it passes?" The room remained silent. Finally, Nicolas gave a small nod toward the chair opposite his desk. She sat without speaking. Minute by minute, the fireworks faded. So did the panic. When his breathing steadied again, he stared at the dark skyline beyond the window. 12 years ago, he said quietly, my father died during what everyone called a celebration. Naomi understood there was more to the story. She also understood it wasn't hers to ask. As she stood to leave, Nicolas stopped her. "Who taught you how to recognize someone who's falling apart?" Naomi rested one hand on the door handle. "I used to be that person." For the first time since she arrived at Carrera Tower, neither of them felt completely alone. 3 nights later, black sedans lined the entrance of the Grand Lakeshore Hotel as Chicago's wealthiest families gathered beneath crystal chandeliers for the Carrera Foundation Charity Gala. Politicians, judges, and business leaders filled the ballroom while cameras flashed beneath towering floral arrangements. Naomi had almost stayed home. The navy dress she wore had once belonged to her mother. She had altered it herself, but it still refused to fit the polished image surrounding her. Victoria Hale noticed immediately. "Oh," she said with a polished smile, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I assumed assistants would remain with the staff tonight. I didn't realize we were relaxing the dress code." A few uncomfortable laughs drifted across the room. Naomi lowered her eyes. She had spent years learning how to survive humiliation without making anyone else uncomfortable. "I'll wait outside," she said quietly. She turned toward the ballroom doors. "Naomi." Nicholas's calm voice stopped every conversation. He crossed the room himself, lifted the empty chair beside his own, and pulled it away from the executive table. Then he looked directly at her. "Would you like to stay?" Not an order, not permission, a choice. Naomi searched his face before giving a small nod. Only then did she sit. Nicolas turned toward the silent guests. "The woman some of you are laughing at prevented a poisoned pen from reaching my hand." His gaze shifted across the executives. She uncovered financial errors worth millions. Another pause settled over the ballroom. Respect is earned by character, not tailoring. No one laughed again. Victoria's smile remained perfectly composed, but her fingers tightened around her champagne glass. As dessert was served, Naomi excused herself for a moment. Crossing the service corridor, she paused beside a partially open maintenance door. Victoria stood inside, speaking to a man wearing a catering uniform. Without a word, She slipped a silver access card into his hand. The man disappeared through the employees-only hallway. Victoria turned. For one brief second, her eyes met Naomi's. Then she smiled, as though nothing at all had happened. The ballroom orchestra resumed as if the moment had never existed. Crystal glasses clinked. Guests laughed politely. Yet Naomi couldn't forget the silver access card disappearing into the waiter's hand. The following morning, she knocked softly on Nicholas's office door. "I need to tell you something." He listened without interrupting as she described what she had seen. When she finished, he remained silent for several seconds. "Victoria has worked beside my family for 8 years," he finally said. "If she's involved, I won't protect her. If she's innocent, I won't condemn her." Naomi nodded. "That's all I wanted." Instead of dismissing her concern, Nicolas unlocked a secure cabinet and placed a slim folder on the desk. "Temporary access." She looked surprised. "Security records." "You wanted evidence," he replied. "Find it." They spent the evening inside the quiet executive floor while rain streaked across the penthouse windows overlooking Chicago. Surveillance logs, elevator records, warehouse deliveries, and server access reports covered the conference table. Cold coffee replaced dinner. Neither noticed the passing hours. At first, nothing connected. Then Naomi stopped. "Wait." She aligned 3 different reports side by side. The silver card wasn't used in the ballroom. Nicholas leaned closer. It entered the server room. She traced the timestamps with her finger. Exactly 7 minutes before shipment data was copied. His expression hardened. Someone had quietly duplicated confidential logistics files without triggering a single alarm. Nicholas immediately requested the hallway footage. The recording loaded onto the large screen. The figure wore the same catering uniform Naomi had seen. Victoria never appeared. Naomi exhaled slowly. "I was wrong." "No," Nicholas answered. "You noticed the right clue." The masked employee removed his cap, just long enough for the camera to capture his face. Naomi's heartbeat stopped. She knew him. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. "Ethan." Her voice barely escaped. The man inside Carrera Tower's security footage was Ethan Cole, her half-brother. The same who had vanished years earlier after stealing the money their mother needed most. Naomi stared at the frozen security image until the screen blurred. The years had changed Ethan's face, but not the scar above his left eyebrow, earned when they were children chasing each other through a vacant lot in Baltimore. She had spent 6 years believing he had chosen greed over family. "I know him," she whispered. "And I wish I didn't." Nicholas dismissed everyone else from the conference room. When the heavy doors closed, he looked at her without judgment. "You don't have to hide this from me." "I wasn't going to." 2 days later, Naomi received a text from an unknown number. Southside Coffee. Noon. Alone. "Please." She recognized the final word. Please. Ethan had never used it before. She showed Nicholas the message before leaving. "I have to hear him." "I won't stop you," he replied. "But you'll have protection." "I don't want armed men sitting beside us." "They won't. They'll stay where you choose." For the first time, Nicolas set aside control and trusted her decision. Rain drizzled over Southside as Naomi entered the aging neighborhood cafe. The scent of fresh bread mixed with old coffee. Ethan rose slowly from a corner booth. He looked exhausted, older than his years. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. Sorry doesn't give Mom another chance. His eyes filled with regret. I never stole that money for myself. He slid a small encrypted drive across the table. They made me disappear. Victoria said if I cooperated, she'd keep you alive. Naomi's hands trembled. What's on this? Everything they planned. Before she could reach for it, a sharp crack echoed outside. The cafe windows rattled. Customers screamed and ducked beneath tables. Ethan staggered backward, clutching his shoulder where shattered glass had cut through his jacket. Hidden security agents rushed inside while Nicholas's convoy arrived seconds later. Naomi dropped beside her brother, pressing a folded napkin against the wound. Stay with me. Ethan gripped her wrist with surprising strength. His voice barely carried above the sirens approaching outside. It wasn't Victoria. He struggled for another breath. She's taking orders from someone named Carrera. His hands slipped away. The encrypted drive had vanished. Paramedics rushed Ethan toward a private hospital while rain hammered the ambulance doors. Naomi remained frozen on the sidewalk until Nicolas quietly placed his coat around her shoulders. Neither of them spoke during the drive back to Carrera Tower. Silence felt heavier than grief. The next morning, every executive received an emergency meeting notice. Victoria Hale stood at the front of the boardroom beside the largest screen. I believe we've identified the leak. A photograph appeared. Naomi, another followed. Security logs, bank records, copies of restricted shipping files. Victoria's voice never rose. Ms. Carter secretly accessed protected accounts, contacted Ethan Cole, and arranged yesterday's meeting. The attack appears to have been staged to destroy evidence before we could recover it. The room erupted with whispers. Naomi stared at the images. Most were real. All had been twisted into a different story. She looked toward Nicholas. He remained standing. No one searches her. The room fell silent. No one questions her, as though she's already guilty. Victoria frowned. Nicholas, the evidence deserves verification, he interrupted. So does her dignity. For one impossible moment, Naomi believed everything would be all right. Then the chief of internal security entered, carrying a sealed evidence bag. We recovered fingerprints from the poisoned fountain pen. Every eye turned. They belong to Ms. Carter. The room seemed to lose its air. Naomi closed her eyes. Of course they're there, she whispered. I grabbed the pen before you used it. No one answered. The explanation made sense. So did the accusation. Nicholas's expression tightened. I cannot ignore this. He slowly removed Naomi's executive access card from the table. Until we know the truth, your clearance is suspended. He did not accuse her. He did not hand her to armed guards. He simply refused to gamble with the lives depending on him. Naomi accepted the card's absence with quiet dignity. You've protected me from everyone else, she said softly. But trust doesn't mean locking me somewhere you believe is safe. She placed her employee badge beside his hand. I need the freedom to prove who I am. Without waiting for permission, she walked toward the elevator. The doors closed. Seconds later, Nicholas's phone vibrated. The forensic report contained one more line. The fingerprints on the poison pen had been deliberately preserved. Someone had wanted Naomi to be found. By nightfall, she was back in Bronzeville, sitting at her Aunt Denise's kitchen table beneath a warm yellow light. Outside, buses hissed through wet streets while rain traced the windows. The apartment smelled of cinnamon tea and wood. Naomi kept replaying the boardroom. Nicolas had defended her dignity. He had refused threats, confinement, and force. Yet when the evidence turned against her, he had still stepped back. The distance hurt more than an accusation. Denise placed a cardboard box beside her. "Your mother wanted you to have this when you were ready." Inside were faded letters and photographs Naomi had not seen since childhood. One image stopped her breathing. Her father stood outside a legal ink factory beside a younger man with Nicolas's eyes, Antonio Carrera. Behind them was the same crimson emblem stamped into the wax seal and engraved beneath the poison pen. Naomi turned the photograph over. Her mother's handwriting covered the back. "Your father helped Antonio expose forged shipping papers. He believed someone inside the Carrera family was replacing contracts and insurance records. 3 weeks later, the factory burned. They called his death an accident. Another envelope held an old fire insurance claim, approved through a shell company tied to Carrera shipping. The signature looked genuine. The ink did not. A cold understanding moved through her. The poisoned pen and altered shipping files belonged to the same old secret. Someone had spent more than a decade removing anyone who recognized the pattern. Her father had seen it. Antonio Carrera had seen it. Now Naomi had seen it too. She reached for her phone. Before she could call Nicolas, a hospital number appeared on the screen. Ethan was awake, and he was asking for her alone. The private hospital overlooked Lake Michigan, its quiet hallways washed in pale blue light. 2 of Nicolas's security men stood outside Ethan's room, but they stepped aside without a word when Naomi arrived. Her brother looked exhausted, his shoulder heavily bandaged, yet his eyes were clearer than they had been in years. "I don't have much time," he whispered. "They're already cleaning up their mistakes." Naomi pulled a chair beside the bed. "Start with the truth." Ethan closed his eyes. It was never Victoria's plan. He explained how Victoria had recruited him with promises of money and protection, only to reveal she answered to someone much higher inside the Carrera family. Every copied shipment record, every forged insurance claim, every stolen server file had been delivered to one man. Marco Carrera. Naomi felt the room grow colder. Nicolas's uncle? Ethan nodded weakly. He arranged Antonio Carrera's death. 12 years ago. He made it look like an ambush so Nicolas would grow up trusting fear instead of people. The poisoned pen was only the final step. Footsteps echoed outside. Ethan lowered his voice. Victoria thought she'd inherit control of the company. She doesn't know Marco plans to erase her too. Naomi remembered the old photograph, the altered ink, the burned factory, and the crimson emblem linking everything together. The pattern had never changed. Only the victims had. She called Nicolas immediately. He answered on the first ring. "I know who it is," she said. There was no hesitation in his reply. "He believe you." For the first time since the boardroom, those 3 words carried more weight than an apology. Naomi quickly outlined a way to verify every piece of Ethan's story using the original ink records, archived fire insurance files, and the shipping manifest Marco believed had disappeared forever. Silence followed. Then Nicolas spoke again, his voice tighter than she had ever heard. "Naomi, we're out of time. What happened?" Marco just summoned the entire executive board to Pier 41. A pause. "And he brought my sister, Eleanor, with him." The line went dead. Outside the hospital window, black storm clouds rolled over Chicago's harbor as the first drops of rain struck the glass. By the time Naomi reached Pier 41, the rain had become a steady curtain, blurring the rows of shipping containers beneath harsh white floodlights. Black SUVs surrounded the loading yard. Lawyers, executives, and security officers stood in uneasy silence, while Marco Carrera waited beneath the steel canopy with Elena beside him. She was unharmed, but the fear in her eyes said she understood exactly why she had been brought there. "This empire needs certainty," Marco announced. "Tonight Nicolas signs everything over." Victoria stood several steps behind him. Her confidence vanished the moment she noticed sealed cases being loaded into a truck instead of the company vault. She finally understood she had never been a partner. She had always been disposable. Nicolas arrived moments later. "So this was never about protecting the family," he said calmly. Marco smiled. "It was always about owning it." Naomi stepped forward before anyone could stop her. "The transfer papers are fake." Every head turned. She opened the old insurance file beside the proposed ownership agreement. The signatures look identical, but the ink reacts differently to heat. She borrowed a security officer's pocket flashlight and held it beneath the page. Slowly, hidden marks appeared across the signature line, revealing it had been prepared weeks earlier using altered legal ink. Even Victoria stared in disbelief. "You forged his approval before he ever arrived," Naomi said. Marco's expression hardened for the first time. A warning alarm suddenly echoed across the dock. One storage container began flashing red. Naomi looked toward the stacked cargo and immediately noticed something no one else did. "The color codes are wrong." The emergency exit route had been switched with the restricted loading lane. "If anyone follows those signs, they'll run toward the danger." Without waiting for permission, she grabbed Elena's hand and led Nicola through a narrow maintenance passage, hidden between two container rows. Security teams followed seconds before a deafening blast shook the harbor behind them. The shockwave scattered rainwater across the pavement, but everyone in Naomi's group escaped safely. As police lights appeared beyond the gates, Marco tried to flee. He never made it. Nicolas turned to thank Naomi. Instead, his knees suddenly weakened. His breathing became shallow. The poison from the fountain pen had not disappeared. It had only been waiting. Nicolas collapsed onto the rain-soaked pavement as sirens echoed across the harbor. Eleanor knelt beside her brother, but it was Naomi who remembered the scent that had started everything. Bitter almond. Altered legal ink. A contact toxin designed to remain hidden until the body could no longer resist. "Don't treat this like ordinary poisoning," she told the emergency physician the moment the ambulance doors closed. The delivery agent was mixed into the ink itself. She quickly sketched the chemical reaction she had studied years earlier while restoring historical documents. The doctor paused, compared her notes with the toxicology report, then immediately changed the treatment protocol. Hours later, the monitors beside Nicolas's bed finally steadied. Outside the intensive care unit, federal investigators arrested Marco Carrera on charges of conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and decades of financial deception. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Victoria agreed to testify. She surrendered every hidden account, every forged contract, and every secret she had helped conceal. Ethan recovered slowly and accepted responsibility for his choices, promising to spend the rest of his life earning back the trust he had broken. 3 weeks later, the employees of Carrera Tower gathered in the grand atrium. Nicolas stood before them, no longer hiding behind distance or fear. I built this company believing control was stronger than trust, he said. I was wrong. He turned toward Naomi. In front of everyone here, I owe you an apology. You saved my life twice. You saved my family. And you saved this company from becoming what my father fought against. He handed her a new identification badge. Director of Risk and Ethics. The authority to challenge any decision, he added with a smile, including mine. That evening, they stood together on the rooftop overlooking Chicago's lights. I won't accept this because I owe you, Naomi said softly. I know. I'll accept it because you finally gave me something no one else ever did. A choice. She smiled and slipped her hand into his. A place where respect comes before power. For the first time in many years, Carrera Tower no longer felt like a fortress built on fear. It felt like home. When Nicolas placed that new badge into Naomi Carter's hands and admitted, in front of everyone, that she had changed both his life and his empire, it wasn't power that won in the end. It was the moment someone finally saw her true worth and had the courage to say it out loud. This story reminds us that real trust isn't created by promises. It's built one choice, one sacrifice, and one act of respect at a time, until another person no longer has to fight just to be believed. Today, think about someone you've quietly underestimated. Remember what Naomi proved before you decide what they're capable of. And if there's someone in your life who has earned your trust through actions instead of words, don't let another day pass without letting them know they matter. If this story touched your heart, comment 1 below. And tell me this. Have you ever met someone who completely changed your first impression? I'd truly love to read your story in the comments. Stay with me, because the next story may remind you that the greatest turning point in a person's life often begins with one unexpected meeting.